shows the disconnect within the history that is taught to African American children. I'm one of them. So, oh wow, I shouldn't be surprised that I did not know this, but I am. Okay, I am. I shouldn't be, but I am. And it was kind of by mistake, if you will, kind of mistake, but kind of not, because there are no coincidences and things don't just happen. I'm starting to see that. Was that in the topic of reparations for African American people was the fact that slave owners already got their reparations in the U.S. as well as in the U.K. So in this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share information that I found from the New York Times from 2019 about reparations and slave owners, which have to do with the U.S., and then also USA Today. And that information is from 2020, I believe. Now, I don't think I said it already, but what alerted me to that this even existed about slave owners getting reparations was I was watching an individual, and I apologize in advance if I say his name wrong, but he has a YouTube channel that's called Indisputable. And I think his first name is Dr. Rashad, and I don't know if it's Richie or Ricky. But I watch a lot of his content, and in a particular episode that he had on his YouTube channel, and he has different segments where he has other journalists and anchors on there who give commentary and news, the bullpen and so forth and so on. I've seen quite a few of his. It brought up this particular topic in regard to reparations. It started with, I guess, some commentary that Dr. Phil, who has his own show, you guys are familiar with him, had said in regards to how detrimental awarding reparations to African Americans would be. And he gave his reasoning behind that. It had to do with that we basically, as a whole, as a people, would just like blow the money. We wouldn't do anything very wise with the money. And by that, I'm just surmising, I would like you to go and look it up if you're interested, if you haven't already heard what Dr. Phil said in regards, to awarding reparations to people of color here in the U.S. And you make up your own mind. I don't want you to just take my word for it, but he basically felt that was would not be, it would be a disaster, basically. And he is not alone in his there are others that after that, when I started to look it up and was aware of it by watching Indisputable by Dr. Rashad, that other people shared their reservations or resistance, or just, they just think that we should not be awarded any type of reparations of any kind. That's the impression that I got, not just for a certain amount of money. I just feel like I kind of got the feeling they thought we shouldn't get reparations at all. And maybe I'm wrong, and I will look to God to help me, rectify that. But that's the impression that I got. Now, when I hear stuff like this, the reflex in my reaction right off the cuff is to get upset. I think that this is normal, but I also think it must be tempered with, I always have to remember and remind myself where this may be coming from, to look behind the imperfect human beings and look more at the spiritual aspect of this. Who is really behind these type of ideals? Behind the whole ideal of owning slaves and oppression. And we know that type does not come from God. God doesn't want people to be enslaved. So he never wanted that. But throughout the Bible, people were enslaved. And what was the source of that? The devil. He wants us to be oppressed and to oppress each other, because of the fact is he's oppressing all of us. That's why things are playing out the way they are. It's because the devil has oppressed mankind. So of course, those who follow the other one, the devil, the adversary, they only mirror who they follow. Okay, if you are God, you do not want to oppress people. You don't want to do certain things like that. So when people say things like this in regards to this particular topic and these type of similar topics, me being imperfect, I get like, whoa, but I have to kind of like sit in it and pray on it and say, okay, it's okay to look up information on it, but always remember that behind imperfect human beings, what you really should be focused on is the spirit, the being behind it, and the spiritual ramifications of these types of things. So it is not of God. Okay, so with that being said, I do want to share this. So from the New York Times, 2019, it says, when slave owners got reparations. I had no clue. It says, on April 16th, 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed a bill emancipating enslaved people in Washington, the end of a long struggle. I knew about that. But to ease slave owners' pain, the District of Columbia Emancipation Act paid those loyal to the Union up to $300 for every enslaved person freed. Didn't know that, though. That's right. Slave owners got reparations. Wow, really? Okay. Enslaved African Americans got nothing for their generations of stolen bodies, snatched children, and expropriated, let me get it right, labor other than their mere release from legal bondage. The compensation clause is not likely to be celebrated today. Surprise! But as the debate about reparations for slavery intensifies, it is important to remember that slave owners, far more than enslaved people, were always the primary beneficiaries of public largesse. The act is notable because it was the first time that the federal government authorized the abolition of slavery, which hastened its demise in Virginia and Maryland as runaways from these states fled to Washington. It offered concrete proof to enslaved people and their allies that the federal government might facilitate the destruction of slavery everywhere, and it confirmed the worst fears of their foes about an interloping, tyrannical president. Now, Abraham Lincoln, however, was anxious to preserve his fragile alliance with loyal slave